Hello, everybody. How are we doing? Can you hear me? All right. Hi, everybody. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to be back with y'all, sharing space, getting this thing done. I hope you've had a really great day. Please hit us up in the chat. I want to hear some of the highlights. And I just want to frame a little bit about what we're doing here in this session. All right. We want to hear from all of those breakout sessions. And we had some amazing facilitators leading that space. So we're going to go from group to group. We're also going to then dialogue about that. And we're also going to hear back from some of those mentee survey questions. All right. So really quick, if I can just hear in the chat, like give me some of your top line. What were some best moments from today? Best moments. Let's see if we can populate anything up in here. Your mentor. I love that. How brave everyone was in sharing their truths. Yes, amazing. Okay, meeting with your playwright mentor. I love that. Okay, opening keynote. Yeah, those panelists were amazing. Oh man, gratitude for all of these gifts and offerings received today. Being vulnerable and having constructive convos with peers. That's the work, y'all. That is the work. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and up the group that was asking, how can college and university theater curriculum shift to become more practical, equitable, and provide the best transition to employment? All right. So if you haven't already, please request to come on screen with us here.
I was about to say, like, I request. Hi, Alex. What a wonderful day. Thank you for leading the morning, and that session with the panelists was incredible. Also, my group has a bit of a manifesto to prepare. So Jacqueline, Alexa, Kristen, Erin, and also Natalia, if you want to, you can also request and you guys can present those rules. But as you start trickling in, hi, Jacqueline, I'm just going to introduce our question again. So yeah, as Alex mentioned, our question was, how can college and university theater curriculum shift to become more practical, equitable, and provide the best transition to employment? And we were really struck by this idea of like, what do we want to like bring in the post-COVID like theater college sense? So in that terms, our first rule of our We Demand, We Commit manifesto, our first one was university and directors must release full production rehearsal schedules prior to the first day of rehearsal. If university or directors need to make rehearsal changes, they must provide 48-hour notice. And the reason why we created this rule was this idea of like, sometimes directors or universities give actors that day saying, hey, you have to come to rehearsals. And it's like, I have a job. And then, well, you have to cut off work. And it was just not being respectful of people's time and their process. So we really just wanted to say, we want to provide a full rehearsal schedule so people can make those choices. And with that, Jacqueline has the second rule.
The second rule to our little manifesto that we made was collaboration is, the key to every production. Every person in the production is a human being and deserves equal respect and care. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Jacqueline. And Alexa, would you like to jump in with the third rule?
Yeah, so our third one is universities must provide more opportunities for students to create their own projects when they are ready and inspired to do so. They must also provide rehearsal space, time to rehearse, and faculty support to create them.
Fantastic. And our fourth rule, Kristen?
Yeah. So university theater faculty and directors must allocate rehearsal time in each production for developing intentional interpersonal relationships. This can take the form of asking each actor why they are an artist, what their passions are, and what their thoughts on the themes of the production are. This may also take the form of starting each rehearsal with a roundtable check-in, asking each individual actor, how are you doing?
Fantastic. And Erin, if you'd like to finalize our fifth rule.
And the last rule will be directors and organizations would have to follow and acknowledge the many movements that have come across, such as We See You What, and any other movements that have been popping up and will pop up. This is all these roles have been created and motivated by acknowledging the toxicity of capitalism and the fact that it has really made people feel like more just a number, and that we are trying to bring the soul, the life, and acknowledging we are human beings with emotions and feelings, and we are not just some disposable amount of income for your pockets, and we too deserve rights. like eating, eating would be nice, right?
We did toy on the idea, and let's just add that as a sixth rule, that there's so many times where actors can't even get time to get dinner because it's classes and rehearsals. So like providing, those check-ins, coffee and sandwiches, and that's like the dream list. But we can always dream of whatever we want in this next stage of university theaters. And I just wanted to thank my conversation, everyone. Y'all brought such great enthusiasm, and I really love discussing those ideas. And I'm eager to hear what everyone else in this group thinks. And Alex, if there's anything you would like to ask of our group, or if you'd like to jump off to the next session, I leave it to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Y'all are amazing. I was like literally screaming over here in my privacy of my room. I just want to lift y'all up. Do y'all have anything else to offer before I invite the next group that I believe was led by Olivia? Anything y'all want to add?
Capitalism is bad.
Thanks, y'all. We'll circle back if there's an opportunity. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Olivia, if you can request, great. I want to bring you, I see you. Thank you. And I'm bringing up, who else? Nia and Eric. Okay. I don't think I see you in my, there you are, Eric. Thank you. All right, Olivia, the floor is yours. Can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm so in this space with you. Alex, thank you for welcoming us into this space. Your facilitation today has been rocking. I am here with two members of our and Eric, and we're going to be talking a little bit paid professional training can best support early career folks, thinking about compensation, the curriculum, educational opportunities. We talked about hiring, recruitment, interviewing. We talked about also what happens while you're there, mentorship, supervision, happens post. We talked about a lot of development, and I'm going to pass it on to Nia and Eric to tell you a little bit more about our demands, what we're thinking about, what changes we would like to see.
So I formulated these in terms of demands, but this is just a summary of what everyone shared. We demand equity within the application and interview process, which includes mutually beneficial relationships when interviewing, that we do away with this experience qualification hierarchy, clear job descriptions that give us clarity about our finances, scholarships, anything that our employer has to offer us to make our work situation there much more livable so that we can sustain ourselves and our work. Clarity about their intentions for us to teach us as blossoming, emerging artists. What is their expectations in terms of us as students in that capacity? We demand clarity about expectations and intentions about what is expected of us so that job descriptions are truthful and give us an accurate description of all that our roles will encompass, and they ain't leaving nothing out. We deserve to learn and create in a less competitive theater landscape, so we're not being pitted against our peers. We are being offered unique opportunities, and our labor deserves to be reciprocated with respect and not abuse. We are not disposable employees. And then I think I'll leave the rest for Eric to share.
Yes, thank you, Nia. Yes, overall, we want transparency about what is asked of us, and we demand that we come into an environment where we are supported, where we can thrive, where we can work together, not against each other for gain, so that way we can create a beautiful piece of art in theater. And to also work in a space where we can be our best selves, so that means having a safe space where like we can come in and not feel like we are either physically threatened or sexually harassed. Cis white male, I've never really had that issue, but I know that's not been the case for anyone at all, so I'm privileged in that. But also, we need to be mindful about how we are and how we treat each other to make sure that we can all do the best work that we can without having to think about our survival. And another point is to be transparent about what the community or the company offers, how they do things, so that when we know that we can best apply for that and know what's expected of us and to know better about what's going on.
Absolutely. This was beautiful. We had so many deep and rich conversations as a part of our group. Nia and Eric, thank you so much for sharing that out about really wanting to be able to do the work and to be able to feel emotionally and physically safe while doing it, amongst so many other beautiful demands. This is wonderfully, wonderfully said. Alex, do you have any other questions for Nia and Eric or myself?
No, other than like, when can I give y'all a theater to run? Okay, I want to see it happen now. Let me put one question forth to y'all. What does thriving mean to you? What would it mean to thrive?
I think, like Aaron said, capitalism is bad. I think particularly like for me as an early career theater artist, like I would want to be able to be comfortable in terms of like committing all of my time to learning and working as an artist and being comfortable doing that. Like I'm not sacrificing like my emotional safety, my physical safety and things of that nature. I think that's like all that I could ask for is a safe space to create and that allows me to sustain myself. That's what I think. Yeah.
Exactly, Nia. I mean, just not having to worry about bills, not having to worry about who I'm in the room with and how they're going to treat me that day, and devote all my time and energy and power in my story into what's the story being told in front of us and what I run around me to better express myself. It happens as best it can be without any, not having to worry about my survival.
You cut out at the end for me, maybe not for everybody else, but I think I got it. You said it, I think, but I want Olivia, come on, Mike, and say what you put in the chat one more time. Let's just hear it. You're muted. You're muted. One more time. All good. Don't worry. We got as much time as you need.
No survival jobs needed.
Thank you. Well worth the wait. Appreciate it. Yes, yes, yes. All right, y'all. I'm going to invite the next group. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. I am bringing up the group facilitated by David. What steps do college and university theater programs need to take to become more actively anti-racist? And let's see, some folks.
Share. Awesome. Hello. Yes, so we talked about what steps college and university theater programs need to take to become actively anti-racist. So our group, we sort of talked about like how this is just such a multifaceted topic in terms of the different steps universities are going to need to take, just because there's not like a single solution or just it's not a matter of flipping a switch, it's a matter of like changing the fabric of an institution. And so I'm going to go ahead and invite Cole to jump on as well. And then he'll share a little bit more about what we talked about and what he took from our conversation.
Hi, everybody. I apologize.
Hello.
I jumped in a little bit late, but we were talking just so everybody has some clarification on what I am. I'm a performance pedagogy. I'm a graduate student just doing my first year. Having an idea what I was going to do right when I started, and then pandemic hit and the social justice movement happened. And then there was a lot of questioning. I had a lot of questions, and I realized my education was lacking and it needed to change in a way. And so I found myself this past fall and this semester of sitting in webinars, a lot hosted by Black Acting Methods, just being in the room and listening. And then I found myself picking up, which I highly recommend for everybody, Black Acting Methods, which I read over spring break. And as a grad student, I was questioning going, is this a universal technique that can be taught by all practitioners, not just people of color? And because I know I want to diversify my teachings when I get out of grad school. And I thought, okay, I read the book and I started this paper. And then I noticed there was, I say, fear coming in me a little bit, like, can I teach this? Because obviously I'm a white male. Can I teach this? Should I teach this, right? And then I was a webinar with Dr. Tanya Pettiford-Watts, who teaches, she's a chapter in the book. And we asked her about, is this something I could teach? And she said, well, nobody asked me if I could teach Shakespeare. Nobody asked if I could teach Meisner. I just did it. And it was just kind of that, like, why am I being scared? I mean, that's a reason why this is happening in the first place. And I realized there was a lack of education of a lot of you. It just started with the Greeks. And then I realized I had to go back and which I am still doing now, is re-educating myself about the traditions of Africa and bringing that. And now just last week, I was like, I took something out of the hip hop chapter and I tried it in the class. It was just little, but it was just wonderful to do that. So I'm just grateful for this book, but it's also just like, it's just something little just to expand and diversify my teaching. So when I'm out of grad school, I can bring that into the space and just really work on my classroom being an inclusive space. And so I hope that kind of answers what you were asking, David, but it's still a learning phase too, but I'm having a great time doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a ton of learning, going to involve a lot of, like what I mentioned in the chat, decolonizing syllabi and transforming not only just what's being taught, but the way it's being taught and how, the people who are going to be teaching it as well, changing the faculty and transforming just every single aspect of the institution so that at its core it is anti-racist.
Yeah.
So that was, thanks for, we had a great conversation talking a little bit more specifically about that. Is there anything that we can address as a question from you, Alex?
Oh man, time is always, I'm worried about it, but I am curious, Cole, are there any other tools or resources that you've seen or utilized to bring other faculty into the new learnings that you're engaging in? Is there anything you can share about that?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, our faculty in January, I go to Loyola Marymount University, and our faculty had a listening session where we had all students come in, especially those of the BIPOC community, and they were just voicing what experiences they've had at LMU in the past and what they'd like to see happen. And it was just 2 hours of just listening. It was checking your ego and just listening. And that was one of the most profound things, that just listening in that room. Again, I just find that the most helpful. And then in a couple of weeks, the faculty is going to come out. They're going to discuss what they've shared and to make things change. So yeah, I'm actually interested to see what happens in a couple of weeks when that conversation happens. But just being in these spaces, especially for those Black Acting Methods, anytime you can be in a webinar with them, Felicia Rashad sometimes goes in there, and it's just amazing. So that has, I think, been the best. I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. We got transparency. We got trust process. We got move at the speed you need to. So thank you both so much for joining us. Deeply appreciated. I want to bring up Michaela and Thaddeus next.
Hello. So our group discussion was on what is the role of social media and virtual platforms in theater and beyond the pandemic. And we had kind of touched on a lot of different things. And So yeah, Thaddeus, I see you in the chat. If you go ahead and click request audio or request to join the visual, that should pop up. But we discussed the role of social media to build collaborative conversations around the creative process. Specifically, we touched on TikTok breaking down the barriers of access to some of these artistic conversations and the way that we can push forward to adjust how theater is perceived and consumed to be more equitable and accessible. And specifically on that topic, we touched briefly on the fact that there's a lot of revolutionary conversations happening in places like Instagram and TikTok because those don't tend to have traditional leaders of the theater industry in them. So there can be a little bit more candid conversations, and being able to push forward with audience development in new ways. I'm just looking at my notes here. And then, of course, Thaddeus had talked about social media being a form of developing audiences as an individual artist and self-advocacy for self-advocacy for your own art and building long-term relationships that way. And we had mentioned networking, how social media can be used as a networking platform as well. And also that something else we had talked about was that theater in digital space doesn't have to look like theater that happens in a proscenium space. Instead, technology can push forward the art form and also help a lot with play development and experimentation in the art form, or even simple things like making table reads and rehearsals easier. Thaddeus, did you want to add anything as well?
Yeah, I do practice at Second City on the side, and one of the things that their business model changed. It used to be Hollywood. People would come to Hollywood, they would go to Second City and train, and now they've opened up online to an international audience. So you've got people, signing in, taking classes from Australia and China and Canada and all these different places, and that's one of the things that theater companies can do now. With this new online streaming platform, they can offer and sell to audiences, creating new content for specific audiences that are also overseas or anywhere in the world. So yes, you can have an indoor performance, but you can open it up to new topics and new demographics with an online tier as well. Simultaneously, you can sell two different types of tickets. That allows more affordability for people that just can't get to the theater but want to see the show online. And then the technology aspect that Michaela was talking about, you can get multiple angles with putting GoPros or small cameras and getting angles that maybe somebody up front, sitting up front that was paying $300 a ticket, getting that angle and giving it to the people in the back with a big screen. So you can get different angles of different actors that you weren't able to get before with different cameras all across the stage, low angles, high angles, side angles. And so that technology aspect is really cool. And then, social media, the slots in between theater, intermission. That's when the buzz happens. That's when people are talking as a community about the production and what's so important about the production and where critics get to create this buzz and write about it. Well, social media now allows us to give people a different perspective out of that box. So when you don't have the opportunity to have an intermission and talk about it with your community members, you can go on social media, on Twitter, which directs a ton of traffic to different areas and creates a buzz. You can have these conversations and not have it be in a compressed box now. And so these are really wonderful ways to promote these works on an individual level where we didn't have that before. And so this is not it's never going to be the same. I don't think it's ever going to be the same. We're going to go back to not a new normal. It's not a new normal. It's a different scenario because we have all these extra tools that we've utilized and built over the past year. And now we have all these new tools that we can add to what we had before. So it'll never be the same.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do have one follow-up question. If you just want to give a shout out to maybe your 2 favorite tools that you're working with right now. Maybe some folks would love to hear that.
Michaela?
Yeah, I've really been loving Instagram as personally an advocacy and education tool for myself. I think it was the best way that I was able to get more involved with activism, especially being stuck at home. And so that's been a platform. And also I haven't participated a lot, but I've really been loving the conversations that are happening on TikTok and the art that's coming out of TikTok. And I will stand by and fight anybody that says TikTok is not arts and culture, because it is.
Absolutely. Giving those behind scenes that we were talking about, creating the compassion of the magic of theater is something that's really lacking. A lot of people don't understand how much time and effort and how many people and what a collaborative process theater is. And so TikTok and Instagram give people that inside look where they already knew kind of what film was like, but nobody really understands how many years it takes to make it high quality, amazing. It can take years. It could take months, but it could take years to make a high quality production. And so, creating that compassion and understanding of what theater is and how difficult it is to produce an amazing product for people to be a part of and to be interactive with is so important. So Instagram and TikTok do that, but Vimeo and Facebook too. I mean, you can now go buy a Yamaha or Mackie mixer at an affordable price and put it in your apartment and create a 1 to 2 person show now, and live stream it to Vimeo or Facebook and sell tickets. And this is something that's mind blowing that very few people thought they could do before, but then they were forced to do it. And so this is great for new upstart theater companies where they can do this at an affordable price and call up their friends and create a quality production in a very small space. So those are also some other opportunities.
Deep appreciation for both of you. Thank you. And yeah, independent artists, like, get on it, build those audiences, build those relationships. All right, thank y'all. I'm ready to bring up Allison and Annie and Abby. All right, y'all are here. I see some of you here. Hi, I'm giving the floor to you.
Thank you. So our session was focused on how do we shift theaters to be welcoming, accessible, and affordable to all audience members. So one thing we focused on is, what does accessibility really mean? It's not just in terms of, can people with disabilities access your space, but also transportation to get to these spaces, the affordability of tickets, and also we touched on not just making it accessible to patrons, but also to the artists themselves, and what that means in terms of someone being able to see themselves on stage, someone like them. So I'll send it over to Abby and Annie to share anything else that we discussed.
We talked about so much stuff, so it's like very hard because we didn't exactly decide what the specific talking points would be when we came here. But I think that a lot of something that we kind of, or I was talking about towards the end, was about, approaching things from the idea of yes, versus thinking, well, I haven't done that before, I don't know how to do that. For an audience member that's saying that they want you to provide a certain service. And maybe if you can't exactly provide that exact service the way that they want, to think of what you can do with the tools that you have, that we as theater makers are constantly doing things like, we can't build a full forest set, but we can throw a few trees up and do some cool lighting. And then suddenly we're like, oh, wait, we do have a forest around us. And also, and also then if you're coming from a place of yes and trying to service that person with what you have, to constantly be checking in on the people you're trying to service to make sure you're servicing them in a way that's beneficial to them, because maybe they said they needed something and you heard one thing, but there's always a breakdown in communication, especially when people are used to things in a very specific viewpoint. And we were also touching on the fact that I do mostly immersive theater, and that a lot of things that are normally accessible in traditional theater won't be accessible in immersive theater, and the way you go about providing that service is completely different. So you have to realize that you're coming to something with a completely different set of restrictions depending on your production. And then also at the very end, I thought of this, but I was thinking about partnering with the city you're in and finding ways to work with them on making things more accessible too. And I brought up how in Amsterdam, if you have a ticket to the symphony, you have free access to public transportation for a few hours before and a few hours after your show, and finding partnerships like that to make things more accessible and holistic within the city that you're engaging in.
Yeah, Annie, I think really hit all the points, but I just know I found it so helpful to really, break down what all of these individual barriers can be. And that sometimes by breaking down one barrier inadvertently, building another one up and really trying to just make sure that you're in constant communication with everyone that you're trying to service.
Thank you all. That is so rich. Is there anything else you want to share from your conversation? Or any questions?
I think that also when we're talking about being accessible for our performers is thinking about, finding ways to reach out to potential performers or staff members that are not necessarily the traditional theater casting listing places or theater Facebook groups or things like that, because maybe people who are in lower served communities or are disabled don't have access to those type of communications. And so actually putting out listings in newsletters for people with disabilities, or reaching out to services that service people with disabilities, as well as putting job listings and casting listings in local papers for lower income neighborhoods, or newsletters in those neighborhoods, versus just doing it in theater and arts newsletters and Facebook groups.
Absolutely. And this is going to sound crazy. Radio is also still a thing, especially in certain communities. And yeah, with the move to so much audio work, I don't know, what's our relationship there? Thank you all. Allison, anything you want to close out with?
No, I think that covers it. I think it's important when you want change to happen that you know how to briefly and eloquently describe what you want, and then you can go on your long, exhaustive passion rants later. But I think that's something for everyone to keep in mind when we're asking for change.
Thank you all so much. All right, I'm bringing up Courtney and Catherine.
Hi, folks. I think Catherine will be joining us soon. We discussed degendering theater and what it means to have gender inclusivity within the theatrical space. And I actually want to hand it to Catherine to start, because we kind of talked about how, well, one of the things we talked about was how gender identity and presentation don't equate your capabilities. And I thought Catherine had a really beautiful example of that. So I'll pass it.
So I identify as a cisgender biracial female, but I'm also a production manager, and the production manager and production world is very male dominated. And so how that phases of how we identify in that field is so fascinating, because people assume based on your gender that you have this skill set in production and how that all molds in. And so someone who has been in this field fighting to get through that as a female, making sure that you can prove yourself as your individual self, proving that you are capable of setting up a soundboard, carrying things by yourself without any support beyond those measures, and also breaking down those barriers so that we take away titles such as master and man and certain gender identifying words into job descriptions and titles is something we really need to circulate around. And I do want to pass it to Courtney if you wanted to speak about the education piece of that, because I thought that was fascinating as well.
Yes. So working within the educational realm, there's two things. One, like me being a queer woman, identify as a lesbian, but very early on in my educational experience when I was teaching preschool, it was like a major fear of mine for parents to know that I was gay because of the like perception that queer people are like predatory, and especially thinking about like how men in education are viewed. So like there was like a strange element of like, because I can be perceived as a woman, like I'm nurturing, so there's not as much of like a predatory fear, but with men working in educational spaces, the expectation of what's to happen when they interact with children, especially queer men. So thinking about these intersections as well with gender. And yeah, and then that side of like being perceived as a woman, the expectation to be nurturing and to work with children. Like, of course you want to work in education. You're a woman, why wouldn't you? Even though that's not how I identify. And on that topic, we also touched on the larger idea of degendering space and degendering the creative process. It's not just about like cis women having a spot at the table. It's about taking away the table and rebuilding so that it's inclusive of all gender identities, not just about women having power in the way men have had power, but truly like neutralizing gender in those spaces. And Catherine had a really great thing that they shared with Elena, who was in our space, about the costume measurements, if you want to talk about
that. You know, just how we're radically inclusive in the space and our approaches, especially in production, specifically with costume measurements. You know, now it's evolving that an individual that identifies as non-binary, trans, or any identity that they have in that spectrum, how are we being respectful and inclusive in the approach that we do that? So with all our onboarding documents we've had moving forward now, making sure that there's gender neutral terms, making sure that gender neutral things are in the design approaches as well, to make sure that we're not assuming, and making sure that we are listening to what people are asking when they come into the space, whether a designer, actor, audience member, and making sure that we're setting those standards across the board, that we're not just doing it because we are focusing on a show that focuses it on the transgender, non-binary, you know, female-based, across the whole spectrum experience, that we are making sure that that is at the forefront throughout the whole thing. And then we were talking about some action items we could take out of the space. And for myself, just to be completely vulnerable, I did share a space with two individuals that use they, she pronouns. And I had the assumption that my safe space was to use they. Because I figured that was a safe umbrella to say they, to appropriate to both of those. However, I learned from both those individuals in the space that they may prefer she more over they. And so moving forward, making sure that you're asking those questions, not assuming what someone's pronouns are, as well as I've worked with people that identify with multiple spectrums of pronouns. So making sure that you're having those conversations and intervaling them as they would like to be respected in that space. So if someone identifies as a non-binary or transgender or anything, making sure that you're aware of those pronouns rather than making the umbrella assumption that is they. So
I love that. And that reminds me of something else we talked about in our conversation, is that it's not enough to be responsive. We have to be actively inclusive. We kind of like folded in some accessibility with like talking about like how it's not enough to just like ask on a form, like, do you need captions? Do you need ASL? Like, we need to be actively inclusive. And then that way those folks feel included, like from jump. And similarly with pronouns, like when you said like assumptions, that's the big thing. It's like, why are we making these assumptions? And like also being vulnerable, like I know exactly how I look and sound. I know exactly how I am perceived by people. And I know that that does not align with how I identify. And to some folks that's surprising, to folks who are more in tune with that, not so much. Maybe if that's a conversation you're used to. But yeah, it's the big thing, is those assumptions and being actively inclusive. And I love what you said about
one
asking
thing I will
questions.
add, just so I want to give this resource because we talked about it a lot, and then I'll pass it back to Alex. But if you haven't heard of Kimberly Crenshaw, she is beautiful, and we are all beautiful flowers. If you've heard of your flower identity chart, and we're all beautiful petals, and all of these experiences intersect. So even though we are speaking of gender, we have all these intersections of our race, of our different identities that flow to that. So even though we're speaking of the gender spectrum, that is not one thing we're looking at this time. You have so many layers to you and so many petals. So please listen to Kimberly Crenshaw. I hope she has more work coming out, and that you are a beautiful flower that blossoms more than just what you see on the cover. You are deep and you deserve all the water in the world. Probably because most of you are in California right now and it's probably hot, so stay hydrated, please.
Oh, Lordy. Alex, do you have any
I have
questions?
less questions, more just I want to amplify. I'm taking away a real key learning here because I often succumb, but like default to the umbrella they too when I don't know. And so just I want to lift that learning up. Thank you. Y'all put so much here. I'm going to take some time to process it, but thank you for the resources. Anything else y'all want to say before we invite the next person up?
No, you're all beautiful. You're all lovely. Keep learning, keep growing, be inclusive, equitable, diverse, and fight for anti-racism. Or yes, I had that right. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and invite Moses up. If you can request, I'd love to bring you on screen. Hello, my friend.
So in my room, to remind everyone, was what does collaboration and power sharing look like in the development of new work for theater? And a constant theme that came up in our conversations was giving power to the audience and really actively and respectfully representing them. So whatever people you want to come to your theater, make sure you're being respectful of their identities and actively coming from a truthful point of view, and not in getting rid of stereotypes or tropes. Actively and accurately represented on stage, they're more likely to engage in a theatrical dialogue and keep coming back to see your work.
Absolutely. What you're speaking about reminds me of remembering how much longer the course of the relationship can be with artists and with our audiences beyond just the night they come or they attend or the run of a show. How are we building longer term relationships is what you shared made me think about. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, especially like I think just such an interesting point that you brought up is like I think many of us can remember like the first time we've either seen ourselves represented on stage or like the first time we've been to a theater. So really keeping that in mind in theater making for the future will make this landscape more inclusive, diverse, and equitable.
Thank you. That. How are we building pathways for liberation through theater and recognizing it as a tool for change, not just a site for change? So thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. All right. I'd love to go ahead and invite Laura and folks from who were in my group, Eric and Pablo. I think you're here. Yeah. Laura, you just want to tell us a little bit about the conversation at large?
Yes. Hi. Our question was, how can actors promote anti-racism, safety, and equity in the rehearsal and performance space? And as David said earlier, this is a very multifaceted issue that we need an 8-week retreat to even just scratch the surface of. But we had a brilliant group of people, and does anyone want to go first with their what they're going to say? Great, Eric.
And start us off with the first demand that we talked about. So we really wanted to create this list of demands, like you said, and I think something that was very important was the encouragement of allies to do the work. Put the work in, stand up for people of color or any marginalized group, especially in a way that's immediate, very controlled, and very not creating more divisive natures, divisive environments, and encouraging others to do the same thing. Just, in case like something happens in the environment, in like a rehearsal space or a practice space throughout the entire production process, having somebody or an entire group of people to make sure that the person who's being attacked or even feeling uncomfortable doesn't have to go through the trauma of recognizing something that's happening, processing, being shocked, stuff like that, and also have the responsibility of standing up for themselves, their whole group, stuff like that. And yeah, so that their identities aren't super, forced to be in charge of their own oppression.
Yes, Eric, and I just want to add, I think in the same way that we spend time bathroom is and where the lights are and all the rules, give them support for those facilitation moments as well, those moments of disruption. Theaters need to be responsible for creating that space, right? And not just putting it on the shoulders of people. Thank you, Eric. Who would like to share next? All right, I'm gonna throw it to you, Pablo.
One thing that we ended up talking about was reallocating resources to BIPOC artist-led communities and groups, and without strings attached. The value of the value of creating art and telling stories, it belongs outside of these Eurocentric institutions, and that is. I think that we arrived to that by talking about racism and confronting it, and how it is on the shoulders of allies, and collectively it's up to everybody to confront their own leaders, and so the higher up you go, those leaders are going to have to confront their own those leaders, and that means theater companies that are big and have huge budgets need to confront their funders, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead and grab that mic, somebody.
All right, hi. Just to kind of piggyback off of what everybody was saying, we really came to this conclusion after really realizing, like, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we don't compact the trauma. And that's something that, Ruth, I hope you can also speak on a little bit. But we need to make sure that the stories that we're telling are true, that they're the truth, that they are not just something that's going to bring both the audience, the actors, and everybody involved down, that it needs to be something that's empowering. It needs to be something that is actually representing the community that it is. And by doing that, you need to make sure that, again, you have to have a space where BIPOC people, where people who don't conform to what the gender stereotypes are, that don't conform to what society sees, they need to make sure that they have their own space, and take up just as much as what we see as a lot of like the white way of, theater.
Yeah, like UIs a lot of times think that they can solve racism with one show featuring BIPOC people. And, like as a white person, my like first instinct was like, those establishments need to, break down their hierarchies. And it's like, no, like they're doing what they know. We need to allocate resources, like Pablo said. And, something that had happened, I mean, yeah, it's going to take a lot, but we're doing the work.
It's really interesting how deeply this goes, because it's not, it's interesting, I guess, but I mean, it's difficult how deeply this goes, because it relates to every aspect of theater and of society and of all the different sectors of art and government and everything, that relates to how we tell our stories and how we see ourselves and our reality, our collective reality. So I think one of the things that came up was, what if PYI embraces their whiteness as not, well, embraces their bias and the fact that they are not universal, the fact that the stories that they're telling are not universal, and that there will never be a universal. In fact, there should be a multiplicity of realities and truths that should be heard and shared, coexisting, and not one canceling out the other. And that's why that goes to how these theater institutions should, which have a hoard of money, should reallocate some of their resources to BIPOC-led artist groups in those communities, not outside of those communities. Because in the past, like the legacy of BIPOC theater that I know of, it's on a shoestring, and it's agitprop, and it's divisive, and it's an attempt to disrupt the status quo. And I think there should also be room for BIPOC-led artist groups to thrive in their storytelling, not just challenge and confront all the time, and not just like constantly play that victim role like we were talking about earlier. So I think there's a whole humanity that needs to be nourished outside of these PYIs, outside of these conventions that we're all kind of tied to.
We don't need to relate in antithesis to whiteness. That continues to centralize whiteness, right? Oh, thank you, Pablo. Okay, Laura, you want to close this out with anything?
Thank you so much, everyone. And yes, very systemic, and I'm so hopeful. You're all so smart and brilliant and wonderful, and the future is yours. That's a saying, but I think it's true. And I think you're gonna, the future is bright with you.
Thank you so much. Listen, folks, if I can ask y'all to actually stay up here with me, and I want to invite anybody else who would like to come up so I can give you access to my screen here. And we want to hear some of these responses to Menti out loud, okay? So if anything floating here is legible to you, let me see, can I Zoom? I'm not sure. Come on mic, and I'm gonna try to click something and see if it opens up bigger. And if something's catching you, come on mic and read it.
I'll say that one. It was about thriving and not surviving, and it was pinned in the chat earlier too. I feel like that is so important for us theater people, because a lot of times we say this cannot pay the bills. We say this will not put food on the table, or their job. That's very important, that we make sure that we need to thrive as people. We need to make sure that we demand that ability to thrive and not have those surviving jobs.
Anything y'all want to lift up here that people said that they needed to today?
I love the affirmation that this is an okay path to be on. I think so often I feel like, am I doing this right? What am I supposed to be doing? Where am I going? I feel like stumbling in a dark closet, and it's moments like this that we have the opportunity to work with mentors and to listen to our peers and to say, no, some of us are all stumbling in the closet, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. It's okay.
Any words stand out here for you that you identify with, y'all? And please tell us in the chat too. I'm really sitting with the empathy still from this morning.
Time makes me think of how decolonizing work is actually taking more time.
Something that's, I think something really fast that's standing out to me a lot in all the past messages and in these two is just like the perseverance of theater, like the good experiences of seeing theater grow and evolve and even potentially get better in certain ways over this pandemic.
And also, like you said, Eric, in that way, we have that communal spirit because we all understand each other's struggles. We all understand what each other are going through right now. And we have that communal spirit to where we understand. We get each other. These people, you guys, everybody here, these are our people. We are each other's people.
Yeah, like mic drop. Yes, I could end it right here. And you know what you're reminding me of? Let's all just take a breath together and remember that we can feel each other in this space. Yeah? I'm not going to count you out. Do it for your body as you need to. Ground yourself in the energy that is in this room, in the wisdom that is in the room, in the historical trauma passed forth in this room, and also the historical wisdom that is being passed through all of us. Any surprises by how this chart landed? I love how close they all are. Any thoughts y'all want to lift up here? Do you identify with any of these?
We can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Sorry. I realized you were talking and
Lordy.
I'm sorry.
Anybody surprised by anything here?
Go back like 30 seconds to what you're saying.
Awesome. I was just reading out loud what's on the grid about what we're worried about, right? And seeing how this landed. Were there any surprises, anything you want to add, worries you want to add so we can release them as a group?
Something with I was almost afraid to put finances because there's so much of an emphasis in theater culture to be like, well, you better starve for it, you know, you better eat ramen for 10 years. And so I think that's it makes me like feel good that that's something that we're concerned about. that's not really a culture we want to perpetuate.
Goodness, yes. Sorry that y'all, this was not right with how I was sharing. I'm so sorry. We are going to be dropping. Thank you for the link. You can check out those results and answers. Please put in the chat if you'd like to add anything to that. Some of these quotes are so amazing. I did just want to say one thing about capitalism in our relationship. So Sonia Renee Taylor, if you don't follow her on Instagram, please do. Author of The Body Is Not an Apology, recently did a really amazing IG Live talking about like, specifically around the Black female experience, this idea that like capitalism is not the same as making money. Capitalism is the idea of how we're hoarding wealth. And especially with BIPOC folks, and we need to encourage the growing of generational wealth. There can be a way of doing that in right relationship. So y'all, this is not about being scared to charge your fees and ask for what you're worth. It is about how are we also building a sharing economy and an economy for mutual aid. So yeah, anybody else from the chat or from the participants want to come up on screen or say anything? We have a couple of minutes before we fully close out.
Piggybacking off of what you're saying, with the theater of medium, the theater as a medium, our bodies are one of the most political things ever. And that's our medium as well. That's our artistic medium as well. And so it's in the theater culture of capitalism, our bodies were a theater tool versus the way that it's like being, or the way that I'm realizing it now, is that a source of trauma and a source of wisdom that is carrying forth a story that's larger than myself. Yeah. It's just a lot of, you made me think of a.
The gift of thinking, my friends, is something I am consistently giving grace and gratitude for. Y'all know it's a luxury. It is a luxury. Any other thoughts from those in the chat or those on screen? Any other offerings? All right, well, I'm going to begin to close this out if that's all right with you all. I want to say thank you for everybody's time and energy. CTG folks, let me know if somebody needs to come on screen and do any other kind of official closing. But I want to take us back to where we started this morning. I want to ask us, skies beyond skies. I want to ask us, how are we caretaking for ourselves, our bodies, our gifts, the soil, the land, the community? How are we asking not just to heal our audiences, but also our artists through this reckoning process? How are we asking ourselves, how are we going to make theater essential to the populations that have not been taught to love it, have had no access to it, and in fact have only been disenfranchised by it? I think we all have a real responsibility in that. Friends, you're amazing. I hope you're going to carry forth the energy of today for many more weeks. I want to thank Center Theater Group for making this space. I want to thank all of the facilitators today for their energy and labor and wisdom. And I want to thank all of the volunteers and everybody behind the scenes who you don't even know have labored incredibly to make this accessible and open and a tool and a resource. So thank you all. Have a really great afternoon.